Richard Lee McNair's story doesn't start inside a maximum security cell or with flashing police lights. It begins in the quiet small town of Altus, Oklahoma. Born in 1958, McNair was raised in a disciplined household. He was bright, polite, and surprisingly athletic. His teachers described him as the kind of boy you'd never expect trouble from. But like many crime stories, the fall began with small cracks, curiosity, impulsiveness, and an overconfidence in his own cleverness. After finishing high school, McNair joined the U.S. Air Force. He was stationed in Minot, North Dakota, where he gained technical knowledge and access to restricted facilities. Those skills would later serve him in ways that commanders could never imagine. Life after service was unremarkable until one night in November 1987 changed everything. McNair broke into a grain elevator office with two accomplices, looking for cash. The robbery turned violent when a worker named Jerry Thies arrived unexpectedly. In the chaos, McNair shot and killed him. Within hours, he was caught and charged with murder, armed robbery, and burglary. The arrest was the end of McNair's ordinary life, but also the birth of his legend. During questioning, detectives noticed how calm he seemed. Even when faced with a possible death sentence, he joked with officers, flashing the same disarming grin that would later help him fool law enforcement across the continent. Awaiting trial in a county jail, McNair decided he wasn't going to stay. Using a small tube of lip balm, he lubricated his wrists, slid out his handcuffs, and crawled through a ceiling vent. It was his first escape, ingenious, risky, and entirely unplanned. He didn't make it far. Within hours, he was recaptured hiding near a warehouse, but it revealed something vital about him. He wasn't afraid of impossible odds. McNair was convicted of murder and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 30 years. He was transferred to the North Dakota State Penitentiary, where he studied guard patterns, routines, and the design of locks. Prison life couldn't contain his mind. He read psychology books, engineering manuals, and every escape account he could find. Fellow inmates later said McNair treated confinement as a puzzle waiting to be solved. He escaped twice more from state facilities using forged documents, ventilation shafts, and even disguises stolen from maintenance staff. Each time he was caught, yet each failure only refined his next plan. By the early 1990s, McNair had become a legend among inmates, smart, calm, and fearless. Guards nicknamed him the Houdini of North Dakota. But when he was transferred to the federal system after another escape attempt, authorities were certain his tricks were over. His new home will be the Pollock Federal Correctional Complex in Louisiana, one of America's toughest high-security prisons. No one had ever escaped from there. No one, they believed, ever would. For McNair, it wasn't a threat, it was a challenge. At Pollock, McNair was surrounded by steel, concrete, and men who had given up on freedom. The walls towered high. The perimeter was lined with motion sensors, razor wire, and guard towers that seemed to pierce the clouds. But McNair's mind never rested. Every day, he searched for flaws, not in the system, but in the people running it. He quickly realized that the most dangerous weapon wasn't force. It was patience. He volunteered for the prison's mailroom repair shop, where damaged mailbags were sewn and rebundled for shipment. It was dull work, but McNair saw something no one else did. Those mailbags left the compound daily on delivery trucks that passed through security with minimal inspection. Over months, he studied how the shipments were prepared, weighed, and loaded. Slowly, a plan formed, an escape that would rely not on violence or speed, but invisibility. Using scraps in the workshop, McNair built a hidden compartment within a pallet of mailbags. He reinforced it with cardboard, foam, and cloth, leaving just enough space to lie down. To breathe, he installed a narrow PVC tube that ran out between the stacked bags. For weeks, he tested it during work hours, timing how long he could stay inside without detection. When guards walked by, he'd hold his breath, still as stone. April 5th, 2006, the day of the escape. McNair reported for work as usual. The hum of sewing machines filled the room. While other inmates were busy stitching, he slipped into his pallet, pulled the last mailbag over himself, and waited. Hours passed as forklifts moved stacks onto trucks. When the vehicle rolled out a gate, McNair was inside, leaving Pollock Federal Penitentiary behind forever. Several hours later, The truck stopped at a postal facility in nearby Alexandria. McNair sliced open the wrapping with a small tool he had hidden in his pocket and crawled out. The driver never noticed. He discarded his prison clothes, changed into civilian attire he had smuggled earlier, and vanished into Louisiana heat. For the next 11 months, he became a ghost. Traveling across the United States and into Canada, McNair survived using cash from small burglaries, stolen cars, and forged identification. He used aliases like Robert Jones and Donald McNair. But his most remarkable moment came in 2006 when a Canadian police officer stopped him while he was jogging in the town of Nash Creek, New Brunswick. The officer questioned him for several minutes, suspicious of his vague answers. McNair smiled, spoke politely, and convinced the officer he was just a fitness enthusiast passing through. The encounter was recorded on the patrol car's camera, an eerie moment showing how charm and confidence could disarm authority. By now, McNair was one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Posters with his face spread across the U.S. and Canada. Still, he kept one step ahead, altering his appearance with dyed hair, glasses, and facial hair. He lived in abandoned buildings, worked odd jobs, and even emailed journalists, taunting authorities about his freedom. It was a life of constant risk, but to him, it was better than the walls of a cell. Yet freedom built on deception is fragile. As police closed in, McNair made one small mistake that would cost him everything: curiosity. He was seen near a rail yard taking photos of trains, something a local worker found suspicious. The call to police would soon end his 20-year run of defiance. October 24th, 2007, a gray Canadian morning in Campbellton, New Brunswick. Frost clung to the grass near the railway yard as Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer Dan Mellinson began his patrol. The town was silent except for the distant hum of freight trains. Ahead, he noticed a lone jogger moving along the tracks, tall, lean, steady pace, wearing gloves and a dark jacket. Nothing suspicious, except for his eyes. The man kept scanning the area, not like a tourist, but like someone measuring every exit. Mellinson slowed beside him. "Morning," he said. The jogger smiled politely. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" His tone was friendly, but rehearsed, too controlled. When asked for ID, he handed over papers that read Robert Jones. He said he was visiting the area, taking photos of trains. But when the officer pressed for details, which hotel, which route, his answers drifted. He couldn't remember names, towns, or timelines. Mellinson's instincts told him something was off. He called for backup. Another officer arrived, holding a printed bulletin that had circulated for months. The resemblance was uncanny. The sharp jawline, the calm expression, the measured confidence. The man in front of them wasn't Robert Jones. He was Richard Lee McNair, the American murderer and escape artist who had baffled U.S. law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. Mellinson looked him in the eyes. "Are you Richard McNair?" For a second, silence. Then a slow smile spread across the jogger's face. "You got me," he said. There was no fight, no attempt to flee. The man who had crawled through vents, faked documents, and smuggled himself out in mailbags simply placed his hands behind his back. "You guys did great," he told them calmly. It was as if the chase had been a long-running chess match, and McNair, recognizing checkmate, accepted defeat with grace. News of the arrest spread instantly. For months, the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Interpol had hunted McNair, the man who escaped 7 times from state and federal prisons, including a maximum security facility considered impenetrable. The public was fascinated. How could one man outsmart so many systems? Back in custody, McNair answered questions as if giving a seminar. He detailed how he survived for nearly a year on the run, sleeping in abandoned houses, stealing food and vehicles, using free Wi-Fi to read news about himself. He described his escape from Pollock Federal Prison with quiet pride, how he built a breathing compartment inside a pallet of mailbags, how the truck carried him unnoticed through the gates. When agents asked if he'd ever planned to stop, he chuckled. "If I wasn't caught," he said, "I'd still be running." Psychologists later described him as a high-functioning sociopath, intelligent, persuasive, and emotionally detached. He didn't see his escapes as crimes, but as problems to be solved. One investigator said McNair viewed incarceration as a competition, not punishment. Within weeks, The United States requested his extradition. His transfer was executed with extraordinary security. Shackles on wrists and ankles, multiple armed guards, aircraft escorted by federal agents. Every movement was logged. No one underestimated the man who once slipped out of cuffs with lip balm. His destination was the most secure facility in America, ADX Florence, Colorado, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The sprawling compound sat in the high desert, surrounded by mountains and silence. It was built for men the government deemed impossible to contain anywhere else. Inside its walls lived terrorists, assassins, and drug lords, including Chapo Guzmán and the Unabomber. Now, it would hold Richard Lee McNair. ADX isn't just a prison, it's a study in control. Each cell is a concrete cube, sealed with solid steel doors and narrow windows that reveal only a slice of sky. Inmates spend 23 hours a day inside, eating and sleeping alone. Every movement outside the cell is monitored by cameras, sensors, and remote-operated locks. Even the recreation yard is a solitary concrete pit, open to air but not to freedom. For the first time, McNair seemed subdued. He followed orders, spoke respectfully, and caused no disruptions. Guards described him as calm, intelligent, and courteous. He spent hours reading, writing letters, and occasionally responding to journalists intrigued by his story. His handwriting was neat, his tone reflective. In one letter, he wrote, "They built the perfect box. I can't beat this one." To him, ADX represented more than confinement. It was a final test, the system that finally outsmarted him. He wrote that his escapes were never driven by hatred toward authority, but by curiosity. I wanted to see how far man can push the limits of the system and himself. Yet, in quiet moments, even his words betrayed a sense of loss. The endless sameness of Supermax life, the identical meals, the silence, the sterile air, stripped away his identity as the master escape artist. For the first time, there was no puzzle to solve, no weakness to exploit. Only time. Years passed. McNair aged quietly behind the walls. Occasionally, he would stand at the window slit in his cell, watching the faint line of sunlight crawl across the concrete floor. Guards said he sometimes timed a movement, as if still mapping invisible routes in his mind. But the world outside moved on. New crimes, new fugitives, new legends filled the headlines. McNair's name became a footnote, a ghost story for correctional officers. Still, among inmates, he remained a myth. Stories of his ingenuity traveled through letters and whispers. The man who escaped 7 times, who hid in mailbags and fooled police with charm alone. He became a symbol of defiance and intellect, a reminder that walls can stop bodies but not imagination. Today, Richard Lee McNair is in his late 60s. He remains at ADX Florence under permanent lockdown, serving 2 life sentences plus 30 years without parole. He receives no visitors and rarely communicates with the outside world. The man who once thrived on movement now lives in stillness. Every sound amplified, every second stretched. There's a haunting irony in his ending. McNair always believed freedom was a state of mind, that as long as he could imagine escape, he was never truly trapped. But imagination, too, needs something to reach for. In the silence of ADX, there is nothing left to chase. The man who outwitted guards, scaled walls, and disappeared through ceilings now faces the one prison even he can't escape. Time itself. And time, unlike any warden, never sleeps.